What is up, Dynasty Leaguers? We have a massive NFL trade that we need to talk about right now. As of about 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago of me recording this, Philadelphia has agreed to trade Carson Wentz to the Indianapolis Colts for a 2021 third-round pick and a conditional 2022 second-round pick per Adam Schefter. And that second-round pick is really interesting because it could turn into a 2022 first-round pick if either Carson Wentz plays 75% of the total snaps in the 2021 season, or Wentz plays 70% of snaps and the Colts make the playoffs, which they actually did last year with Phillip Rivers playing all 16 games last year as well too. So it seems like it could be a pretty good possibility, as long as Wentz doesn't get hurt, that that pick actually ends up becoming a 2022 first round pick. So it could be a first and a third, but at least for right now, it's a second and a third that the Eagles got in compensation for Carson Wentz. So we have a couple things that we need to dive into for this in terms of instant reaction on both sides of this trade, both the Colts side and the Eagles side. So we'll start with the Indianapolis Colts. They are now gaining Carson Wentz in what I think is a very good trade for the Indianapolis Colts. With Phillip Rivers retiring, they needed another quarterback coming in, and instead of paying up a complete first round pick for a quarterback, or even more than that, because they have the 21st overall pick, that's not going to get it done for a quarterback this year. 4 or 5, maybe even 6 quarterbacks go off the board in the first maybe 10 to 15 picks, and in order for the Colts to move up, they're going to need to pay significantly more than what they just paid for Carson Wentz, he's proven in the NFL, even though he's been on a really down skid for the past couple of years since his MVP season. But at least he's shown the capability and some raw talent in what he's been able to do in the NFL with the Eagles. So I like the trade personally from the Indianapolis Colts side. It wasn't a whole lot in terms of compensation for Carson Wentz, a starting quarterback. They have a lot of cap space as well too, and they can kind of see and feel out what they need to do moving forward with Carson Wentz. The only biggest problem, in my opinion, at least for Wentz and for the Colts as well too, is they have a lot of weapons leaving in free agency. Specifically, they're losing T.Y. Hilton, and they're losing Trey Burton as well too. Even though they have a solid young core with Michael Pittman, they have Paris Campbell coming back, Jonathan Taylor out of the backfield, Nyheim Hines, but they need to add some more weaponry in Indianapolis for Carson Wentz in order for it to not be like a repeat of what he just left, even though he's getting an upgrade at the offensive line. He needs those weapons to be able to throw to. I know that this wide receiver class is very, very elite, very talented. They could go after somebody like Chris Godwin, Allen Robinson, Juju Smith-Schuster, Will Fuller. There's a lot of options that they could go out and get in the wide receiver free agency class this year in order to help Carson Wentz, as well as possibly re-signing T.Y. Hilton and possibly Trey Burton as well too. Those are definitely options, but they need to get more around Carson Wentz in order for him to be more fantasy viable and for this to be ultimately a better investment over the next year to maybe 3 years with Carson Wentz's deal. Looking at Wentz from a fantasy standpoint, though, is actually really interesting. So in 12 games last year, Wentz finished as the quarterback 22, averaging 17.62 fantasy points per game, which actually would have put him ahead of guys like Baker Mayfield and Matthew Stafford, Cam Newton, and Jared Goff in terms of just raw points per game. So it actually wasn't all that terrible of a season for Wentz in terms of fantasy. He was chucking the ball. He had so many air yards that just were not completing. So it actually could have been even better if Jalen Reagor and Deshaun Jackson had come down with a lot more of those deep balls. He was just letting everything fly, losing a lot of points to interceptions as well too. In 12 games, 2,620 yards, 16 passing touchdowns, and 15 interceptions. That's not great numbers, but it could definitely be improved, especially when you look at the fact that in those 12 games, Carson Wentz was sacked 50 times. 50 times in 12 games. That's insane. He's getting sacked over 4 times per game, especially whenever you compare that with Phillip Rivers, who was only sacked 19 times in 16 games behind that much more improved and elite offensive line in Indianapolis with Quentin Nelson at offensive guard. So that is probably one of the biggest upgrades for Carson Wentz. He gets a much bigger offensive line. He doesn't need to run for his life. He doesn't need to make snap decisions, which ultimately led to really bad throws, interceptions. There's a lot that we could find hope for with Carson Wentz moving forward. So I actually don't mind him as a super buy low right now. If you guys out there, dynasty managers who had Carson Wentz or maybe bought him on the low through trade talks, that's actually probably was a pretty good trade and investment, at least with what you have right now. And maybe those guys out there who have Wentz and Hurts, I know I've seen that a few times on Twitter, that there are managers out there who had both quarterbacks last year. Now you have two starting quarterbacks potentially instead of just one, and we're trying to figure out which one you needed to play on a weekly basis. And was it going to be Hurts? Was it going to be Wentz? Just not really playing that game anymore. So now we can move on to the Jalen Hurts side of it, the Philadelphia Eagles side. So they get definitely out of the mess of the Wentz and Hurts debate. And as long as they don't take a quarterback at 1.06, they can fully move forward to see what they have with Jalen Hurts and hopefully get him some weapons as well too. That was kind of the name of the game for the Philadelphia Eagles the past 3 years, is they haven't gotten any weapons for their quarterbacks. For Carson Wentz, they invested in Jalen Reagor last year. A lot of people really question that, especially whenever they saw what Justin Jefferson did just a pick later. They invested in J.J. Arcega-Whiteside in the second round just a couple years back as well, passing on DK Metcalf. So there's been questionable decisions made in terms of the weaponry that they have given Carson Wentz in the past, but hopefully that will not continue, or at least they can just, go all in on volume right now, because Alshon Jeffrey, Zach Ertz, these guys aren't getting it done for the passing game in Philadelphia, and they won't get it done for Jalen Hurts. I know trades have been explored for Zach Ertz as well too, but they definitely need some more weapons outside of basically Jalen Reagor right now and Travis Fulgham and Miles Sanders out of the backfield, even though he's not really getting all that much targets out of the backfield. It's kind of a weird offensive situation with a whole new coach and offensive coordinator they need as well too. But Jalen Hurts, at least when you look at what he did at the end of last season, he started 4 games at the end of last year to spell Carson Wentz from weeks 14 through 17. In those 4 games, Jalen Hurts was actually the quarterback 6 through that small sample size stretch, primarily through his rushing ability. If you look at his rushing stats from those 4 games, he averaged 68 yards per game and also scored 3 touchdowns on the ground in those 4 games as well too. That actually puts him on a pace for over 1,000 rushing yards and 12 rushing touchdowns. I don't expect those rushing touchdowns to be there, but if he's going to be running that much per game and is on pace for 1,000 yards, and yes, a very small 4-game sample size, but we're talking about Lamar Jackson rushing numbers here. Even if he gets into the 800-900s and doesn't exactly hit 4 digits, 800-900s is still going to be a lot. It's still going to be very fantasy valuable. And the name of the game for quarterbacks right now in fantasy is rushing upside. You look at 2020, Lamar Jackson had a really down year after that explosive 2019 season where he had over 1,000 rushing yards. But you look at 2020 again, Lamar Jackson was still the quarterback 8 on the year, right next to Tom Brady, despite throwing nearly 2,000 fewer passing yards than Brady and 14 fewer touchdowns. Where he beat them was with 1,000 rushing yards and 7 rushing touchdowns. That's phenomenal. Those are huge numbers. And if you look at the top 5 quarterbacks outside of Aaron Rodgers, every quarterback in the top 5 had at least 400 rushing yards as well too, and 2 of them actually had over 500. So that's really what we're looking for when we're talking about this new wave and new era of fantasy quarterback scoring. We need that rushing upside, and Jalen Hurts is going to be able to provide that. And basically anything that he provides in the passing game, just an average normal 2,700 yards or 3,000 passing yards and 20-something-ish passing touchdowns, that's just gravy on top of the rushing right now. So that could definitely boost him into being a top 10 fantasy football quarterback in 2021. Like I said, so long as the Eagles don't further mistake and further go down the rabbit hole of a giant mess and draft a quarterback at 1.06 that they have this year. There's definitely maybe some options that could be there. They've been talking about Trey Lance, or maybe they trade up for a quarterback, or maybe somebody slides because people are trading all the way around. It's really hard to tell at this point because there have been reports that some teams have Zach Wilson over Trevor Lawrence. So it's going to be a really crazy first 6 picks for the Philadelphia Eagles that they may or may not even have the opportunity to draft someone at 6, depending on how the draft board falls. And if that's the case, hopefully that is the case, or at least they're smart enough to pass on somebody. They can go then and look for offensive weapons. They need a lot of help on that offensive side and kind of the defensive side as well too, although it's pretty solid, at least in the front 7. The secondary is kind of weak, but they need help for Jalen Hurts. And if they can draft someone at 6, like a Jamar Chase, a Devonta Smith, not so much, I don't think they need like a Jalen Waddle type, because I feel like they have that with Jalen Reagor. But if they can grab like a true alpha wide receiver, maybe even trade back and grab Rashad Bateman, like they just need more weapons. And so with that 1.06, they have their second round pick at 37 overall too. They could definitely grab, one, if not maybe 2 guys in the first 3 rounds, 4 rounds that could come in and help the Philadelphia Eagles, because they're not signing anybody in free agency. Carson Wentz's cap hit is way too much. They're way too deep in negative cap space, and it's a whole entire mess. They need to look at the NFL draft and this rookie class that's coming in. In terms of where I would look to buy or hold or sell Jalen Hurts right now, we haven't gotten full February ADP yet, just because rookies got integrated and the mock drafts get run a little bit later in February, but it's nearly come out. And Ryan McDowell actually tweeted out the first round of Superflex Dynasty ADP, and it's basically 9 out of the first 12 picks in the first round are all quarterbacks, and none of them are Jalen Hurts right now. Trevor Lawrence is actually ahead of Jalen Hurts in terms of February ADP. That may or may not change. I doubt it will change, because people were going to want at least the 1.01 over Jalen Hurts. But if you're looking at where he should slot in terms of ranks, I mean, there's definitely opportunity for him, especially with his rushing upside, where he can come in quickly and easily to being a top 12, a QB1 in Dynasty Fantasy Football. You could have him ahead of guys like Aaron Rodgers, who might have some regression this year. You could have him ahead of Baker Mayfield, Ryan Tannehill, these passers that don't have a lot of rushing ability. They're just straight passers. That's really where he's going to be able to slide right in. And then ultimately, if he is the starter moving forward and does show out a little bit with a top 10 fantasy season in 2021, he could jump up into that, Russell Wilson, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert type of tier, where he's in that second tier of quarterbacks. Maybe even some people have it as like a really long first tier or really long second tier if it's just Pat Mahomes at the top. He can kind of fit into more of that group, but as of right now, I would slot him in between Tannehill, Baker, Aaron Rodgers, Burrow even as well down in there too. I would definitely be looking at guys like that to trade for Jalen Hurts, or if you grab a guy that's like a Lamar Jackson or a Joe Burrow, or potentially even a high first round pick like a 102, 103, 104, those would be the type of moves that I would be looking to make to sell off Jalen Hurts and try to upgrade that with a more solidified starting quarterback in the NFL, and somebody that you've known and you've seen from at least up to this point in the NFL as well too. So that is at least my instant reaction on the Carson Wentz trade to the Indianapolis Colts on both the Colts and the Eagles side. Please hit that subscribe button, ring that notifications bell to be notified every time that we drop a YouTube video. We're going to be doing more of these instant reactions, especially as the free agency and NFL season winds up a lot more. We expect there should be more trades potentially in the future. Maybe Deshaun Watson actually gets dealt, Teddy Bridgewater, Derek Carr. There's a lot of moving pieces in the NFL right now that could be happening, and we would want to be here to help you guys kind of decipher and travel through all of the news and information to pull out what you really need and kind of what you don't, and be actionable Dynasty Fantasy Football advice. So subscribe, ring that notifications bell. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will catch you guys next time.